Welcome to the Spiritual Geek Podcast, Wisdom for Modern Times, where we focus on living with intention to consciously create a life you love and celebrate. I'm your spiritual geek, Sheila Franzen, and so excited to share another episode with you. Today, Carol Ann is back, and we're going to talk about the second book that she compiled and released called Divine Healing Stories. Carol Ann Halstead is the author of Modern Accession, Stories from the Spiritual Paths of High Initiates, and Divine Healing, Powerful Stories of Transformation with Higher Selves and Beings of Light. She's been affiliated with the Ascended Masters Portal in New Zealand since 2013, passing out of the cycle of rebirth in 2016. With no formal book writing experience, Carol Ann decided to share her ascension journey and compile stories from others on the same path. Her books are meant to inspire others to raise their spiritual vibration and connect with the Ascended Masters for the purposes of ascension and healing. So welcome, Carol Ann. It's wonderful to have you back.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
So we have a very fun topic today to talk about the book that you had the idea for called Divine Healing Stories. So why don't we just start with where the idea and the inspiration for the book came from, and then we'll dive more into this beautiful topic of divine healing.
Well, I knew that I was going to be writing or producing a couple of books at some point in my life. And Modern Accession was the first one. And I knew that there was going to be a second one. And I thought, oh, it'll be a sequel of some sort. It'll be Where Are We At Today? Or maybe there'll be a new selection of initiates who wish to write about their stories. And then I'll be able to produce something like that. But I let it be, and I allowed for the inspiration to come. And within a couple of years, I was getting a nudge about let's do a book about healers. There are many healers that are also on the spiritual path within our group, and it just seemed like ideas started to come forth and bubble up. But I was unclear about how that would proceed and who would participate in it until about a year and a half ago. And I worked with Lori Diebold, who is a beautiful clear channel and who's got a story in the book. And she actually channeled my higher self for me, who came in very clearly and said, it's really time for you to do this book. And you will know who is to be included and you will know how this will go forward. But he gave me some parameters about what the intention of the book was. And so then I was able to proceed. And having had the experience the first time, there was a tremendous amount of flow to it this time. So I was really pleased about the process. So the name Divine Healing came as a result of a group effort. And we realized that that really was the best name for it, because each of us works with beings of light, even other than our higher selves, that when we do our work, and we've been guided and taught new ways of healing. And so we call this the divine. This is our connection to source through these healers that are on the other side. They are invisible, but they have given us information that we can use to help others on the planet who are suffering. And so it truly is, all the stories in the book are a reflection of that it is that we are healers that are not working alone. And the divine healers are, most often we're referring to ascended masters, angels, guides who help us in both big and small ways. I mean, we understand how we are helped in ways sometimes where as simple as finding a parking spot. You call on an angel and, it's like, okay, they want to help create more ease and flow for us in our lives. They know that being a human on the earth is one of the most challenging things that we can experience. And so they're always available to us. We have to call on them. And that's what each of us do whenever we work with clients. And so, the clients are getting the additional benefit of the helpers that are the invisible helpers, the divine helpers. And it just makes the work so much, I think, better for our clients. It's different than just going into well, an energy healer who may not be aware of the fact that they may not be working with anyone else. They're just using the flow of energy or whatever to create change in the individual. But if they're very conscious healers and recognize that this flow can come through them, not because of them, that is more beneficial to the client. There's much more capacity for change, I would say.
I, there's so many things there I want to
I
respond
know.
to. I probably should have taken notes so that I don't miss them. But the most recent one, I wanted to touch on what you just said. I'll start there and then we'll see what else comes back to me, which is this concept of, well, you mentioned requesting, right? Like the ascended masters and guides and beings and our higher self, they're never going to interfere in our human journey, right? So they're providing support and they're always there available to help assist in healing. And the intention with the healer and the client or the person being healed of being willing to receive creates the opportunity in the space for that additional energy and those beings to, like you just said, interact. It's better for the client. In reality, it's more energy being transferred. It's more healing power. There's an aspect of more to it because of the intention and the request to say, higher self, ascended masters, join me in this healing. They then bring a whole nother level of energy to that healing that is not there or available if you're working with somebody that does not call in that level of energy.
Exactly. And also, we may be shown, for instance, where to look, and we receive help with the clearing and healing for the individual. And we understand that healing is sometimes it's a complex process, and it may or may not have an immediate effect on the individual, but it can be cumulative. That is, that as you continue to work with the client and you continue to access these non-worldly beings for assistance, they layer it so that in chronic conditions, for instance, there's healing over time. But people are always helped on some level beyond just the physical to physical. And that's what is a huge difference in our Newtonian understanding or model of healing that modern medicine is based on. It's looking at the physical from the basis of anatomy and physiology, or what is the body and how does it function? And if there's something that is visibly wrong with it, then the approach may be surgical. Very often it's pharmaceutical, and that carries all its own side effects. Whereas this type of healing, there are no negative consequences of intervention and asking for intervention from the divine. And that's what's a beautiful part of it. And you can trust in that. So that's, such a beautiful benefit to working with these non-visible helpers.
I love that. Non-visible helpers. That's a really,
Yeah.
It brings a little levity. And yeah, I love it. Like, they're like, yeah, we're the non-visible helpers. Like, I can feel them. They think that's great. So that's really fun. So did you have something there?
No.
No. We've mentioned higher selves, and we talked a little bit about this on a previous episode where we talked about the book Modern Ascension. Yet in your preface here, and I'd like to read this paragraph, I think it's a beautiful description of trying to understand higher self for those that might be listening and aren't familiar with, well, at least we're gonna language it in how we think about higher self on this path of ascension that you also have integrated so beautifully into the book, where all the healers also told their stories of ascension. So you write the definition is the higher self is a vast multidimensional being. There's one for each soul, and each one is unique. Their purpose is to help our souls ascend and in turn ascend themselves. They do this by creating life after life for us to experience. They design each human life with the capacity to realize its true nature. this is the awakening that's now happening on the planet. And then you go on to describe this has happened to each of us on the journey of ascension. And so I think this concept of understanding that, you've 10 amazing individuals stepped forward to share their journeys in this book and how they've become healers. Yet what we're really talking about is when we have moved into an intentional place of wanting to work with higher selves, and you know the healers that you've highlighted in the book have moved past the stage in their journey of incarnation of completing and clearing their karma and completing their life cycles here on the planet, that higher self has a different level of access to work with people in human form because of the connection and settling in of the higher self in the holy hearts, not just of these 10, but of the many other, actually probably hundreds at this point, of people, at least intentionally on this journey. And just in this aspect of a spiritual journey and higher consciousness of relating and working with higher selves, there's another level of energy available. And so I think that's an aspect of what we're talking about with divine healing and being able to work at a different level with the beings, because the healer's own physical form is clearer because the karma has been cleared and they have worked through mental aspects and emotional aspects. And we're all always still journeying and healing. Like, any healer's journey never ends because they're always in their healing process. But the longer and the more that they've healed, the more they have access to. And that allows them to more deeply work with all those that come to them looking for healing.
That's exactly right. When I studied shamanism many years ago in my pursuit of learning all things healing, that was a really interesting point, that as the shaman goes through their own healing process, then they are able to heal others. So as they have cleared and healed whatever it was that they were manifesting in their own life and had brought forward, that allows them to have a clear vibration on the level of those particular soul journeys. And if you have a client then coming to you, you're able to heal them because you're coming from a higher healed vibrational level. So your point about the fact that we're on a continuous journey of healing and learning and growing within ourselves, there's just nothing static about this at all. But we have embodied our higher selves. They aren't outside ourselves. Guides and other helpers and ascended masters are outside ourselves, and they can be accessed for healing for sure. But our higher selves are fully embodied, and it's a new experience for them, and it's a new experience for us. And it provides us with a different level of access to the ability to heal and clear ourselves in an instant, almost in times, because we can call on our higher selves and say, okay, I want to clear this pattern of behavior. And we get to go back to the point of origin of it in whatever past life it may have occurred, and clear through all levels, through our DNA, our ancestry, and all our cellular memory. And they do it in an instant. Again, we have to ask for all of that clearing, but every time we do that clearing, we raise our own vibration every single time. And so that work is continuous. It's magical and heartfelt and beautiful, and it only helps our personal evolution. And every time we evolve in any way or heal in any way, we help everyone else on the planet. And that's the beauty of it. So it's really brilliant. I love that aspect of it.
Yeah, and you've used, like, I tend to think about healing a little differently, so it'd be interesting for us to talk about this here. You've used the words that the healers can, they're healing people, but I always think of it as, as healers, we're channeling an aspect of healing energy and we're creating a space. The healing, though, is not the healer. It's actually the person receiving, because you can have a person receiving, and if they don't want to be healed or don't believe in healing, all the healing energy in the world is not going to change that, because they still are in their own belief systems, right? And their own constrictions and their own, whether they want to let go and are they're willing to receive. I'm reminded it must be Jesus hanging out with us here as well. But, even the stories in the Bible, right? People interpreted them to believe that Jesus was doing the healing. And if you read many of his through people he has channeled through, he's like, it was never me doing the healing. It was the individual believing they could be healed, that by touching me, they received the energy they needed to heal. And so I think sometimes in the healing world, people try to turn over their healing process to healers. And that's not really at all what we're talking about, because each individual is responsible for their own healing. The power and the benefit of working with healers is they can channel an additional energy, they can connect to the beings of light and provide a space and provide actually a channel, right, for that energy. And yet it's still the individual in their personal power that needs to own their healing process.
Exactly. And the body has that capacity to heal always. It's the body's intention to heal. It's an automatic process. So when there's an injury, there's an immediate flood of blood to the area, bringing vital nutrients and bringing different blood cells and there's scavengers that can, take away the disease or whatever bugs that are in there. There's the clotting mechanism that wants to seal it over. So that's just one example of it. But that is the body's natural drive, is to heal. So when the healer is creating a space because of their intent to bring a higher vibration or healing space through to them, and they're working with divine healers, then the person's capacity to heal is activated. And when they believe in the process and they surrender to the process, it absolutely can move forward. But we can also block our own healing, as you were saying, by just that whole process of, well, I don't believe in this, but well, okay, well, maybe it will work. I don't know. But as healers, when we're working, we always tend to enter into a healing session with surrender, with humility, and with loving, compassionate awareness, so that with the intention is then set to create this space of potential for healing. And so it's a different level of interaction with an individual than, say, the medical model is. I mean, there can be the intention for assisting the individual, but it's using vibration in a different way. Intention is a level of vibration, but it's not taking responsibility for it. It's recognizing the body has the innate capacity for healing and that we can support it for sure. Yeah.
So when you were speaking about the book, you mentioned that you had received a message for the intent of the book, like what, and we've talked a little bit about it here of trying to share it, but I feel like there's something more about what is the intent or the message that the Ascended Masters, your higher self, wanted people to really take away from reading this book.
Well, they wanted to create one of the words that came through strongly was hope. And that is very often something that can be, people feel like the treatments are failing me. Things aren't working for me. They may have had accidents or trauma that they're having a very slow recovery from. They are needing to get a message of hope that there is an opportunity for healing and having your best life. So that even if you're not going back to the same old activities that you did before and it's not 100%, you are healed on a level of spirit, a level of your emotional and mental bodies, and to a certain extent within your physical body. And working with a healer helps with that evolutionary process, as opposed to, here's some medications. They do have some side effects, but this this is the story for you now, and this is what you have to live with. So it is trying to describe that there is hope for all kinds of situations, conditions that you might be experiencing, and that you don't have to give up. Because people can sometimes live with chronic conditions of pain for a very long time. And there's some interesting stories in the book about healers who, in one session, for instance, were able to discover the root of the problem, bring it forward, and healing took place. And the person jumped up off the table and said, I have no more pain. So those stories are kind of, they're fewer and far between than they're not the everyday story. But yeah, the message is there's help available for you. And this is there's maybe a different path. It might be a path of, we call it healing, as opposed to just perhaps a medical intervention or treatment. It's not just a treatment, it's about healing at the source. And once you're able to get to that level, very often then the symptoms can dissipate. For instance, if it's trapped emotions from whatever, it might be a past life, it might be the current life or situation, you can actually have, some rebalancing, let's say, and healing, and be able to move forward with your life in a better way than you're experiencing now. Is that it? Am I answering your question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I love that hope, right? Like
Mhm.
that is, there are so many people struggling with so many physical things on the planet right now. And, some of that is purely physical. I mean, there's toxicity that we all deal with every day with heavy metals and chemicals. And then we have the physical aspects of, knowing that different diseases and even viruses and toxicity loads can be carried to the child from birth, right? Like it's not even
Right.
that we've just absorbed it in our human body, but it comes through in the aspect of the physical, right? The being born from either the mother or the father, and that fascinating process that something that seems like it would be brand new every time, actually, things are passed down in the memory of the DNA and the data that's stored, and all of that. And so, but there is this other aspect that is emotional. As you can have emotional stuff that is stuff that accumulated from your childhood, or a lot of trauma carries all kinds of emotional impact. And then you have those same things, emotional, mental trauma, that you also carry from past lives. And so the challenge with healing and our medical system is it's always only treating the physical. There are places, and that, with mainstream medicine, I'm going to say, they'll deal with mental a little bit, and maybe there's some therapy or counseling that's recommended as part of your healing process. But it's, when we're always looking at this model now that is so much larger, right? I went through my own journey with cancer 2 years ago, and, chose to have the medical system remove a tumor, and also chose that I would not do all of the post treatment that the medical system recommended because it didn't feel right for me. It didn't feel needed. And I wanted to address my immune system. And I chose not to do radiation, even though they absolutely wanted me to do radiation from a breast tumor that was removed. And I was like, yeah, but my recurrence is so low, it makes no sense for me to take the risk of the damage from radiation. And they're like, yeah, but our standard process is you do radiation. And I'm like,
Right.
I'm not going to do the radiation. I'm going to choose to do my, own journey of energy work, understand the origin of whatever layers, right? Origin of my emotions, mental beliefs, past lives, along with then alternative ways to support the body with, a biomat, and the heat of the biomat actually kills cancer cells. And so it's doing the same thing radiation does, but in a much more healthy way that's supporting the energy of the
Mhm.
body, not destroying the skin and the part of the lung and the heart based on where they wanted to do radiation. So, but I think there's when anything new is trying to come, into its awareness on earth, right? There's people that have gone through all kinds of, I don't know, energy healing and nothing happened. And so then that is in this consciousness of, well, it's not really real because I can't see it, right? When I take a medicine or somebody does surgery or somebody puts a cast on, I can see it, right? It's into the five senses. And when we talk about energy healing and divine energy healing, we're talking about the unseen. And yet, for many, the unseen helpers, as you just said, there are many that can actually see these helpers and they can see through their clairvoyance and the clairaudience of hearing them. Those of us that have the claircognizance of knowing and feeling them, like it is real. And so it's trying to take this aspect of spirituality and science. We were talking about Joe Dispenza before we started recording here and how, he's brought this aspect of healing that has so many facets. The power of the mind. His book, The Placebo Effect, is incredible. I still listen to it off and on just to remind my own mind the power it has in my own healing journey. But back to hope, right? Like we're talking about all these aspects of things that are hope for healing, hope that life can be different because it is a hard place here on earth. Being human is hard. And when we don't understand that the reason it's so hard is the cycles of incarnation that we could just be stuck in, we haven't completed, we haven't learned our lessons, but it's heavy, right? Like there's a whole lot of us on the planet, right? At almost 8 billion people and everybody in their journeys of, needing hope. And yet we have so much war and conflict and disaster on the planet that I think it's easy to get caught up and you lose hope. And so I really love the message of hope, right? There's an aspect of hope for the book. You read other people's journeys and that creates hope within you. And then you can also understand and embark on your own healing journey, right? We're always about how do we move forward? How do we take responsibility that you can be more discerning around the healers you work with, making sure you know how do those healers work? Where are they at in their own healing journey? Have they really had incredible success with helping people, right? What has other people's experiences been? Do they help you take ownership and learn that you have to be open to healing for healing to work? So I think hope is just such a beautiful, simple thing, but so many facets when we talk about healing and how we can create a space for healing.
Well, you covered a lot there, Sheila.
I know. The
Yeah,
information started flowing.
it started flowing through. And I'd like to go back to what you were saying before about, there's some spectacular things that modern medicine provide us, but you chose not to do part of the recommended treatment. You didn't, it's like, oh, you're going to screw up their stats there, girl, by not doing that. But, and, it's be nice to be able to work with a healthcare team that really understands that, well, there's very often a source other than the physical for the symptoms you are displaying in the present. And so one treatment modality that is specifically radiation that works physical to physical may not be the solution and may cause serious side effects that could have been avoided by clearing patterns that you are able to identify. And so if we can develop a new model of health and healing where we understand this and learn how to identify at source, we'll be way better off at being able to manifest healing within our bodies. Like the current model we've talked about is based on the physical to physical. And, and thank God for the development of vaccines and insulin and antibiotics that we know are life-saving. And those are, and the use of technology is very specific that helps focus on what's going on within the body. But we do need a new model of the human, and one that incorporates not just the physical body, but looks at all the other aspects of our humanness. The Newtonian model is incomplete. We are emotional, mental, and spiritual beings. We are all divine sparks of the one source that created us. This is what connects us all as one body, yet differentiated as unique expressions within that wholeness. With a more expansive model, there's room to see the cause and effect in illness from a much broader perspective. And so we don't just look for a toxin, though that may be the cause, that may be what it is, that may be the source. But we also give birth or room for the discovery of what if, that the individual is experiencing this chronic pain in a part of their body where it actually is sourced from a past life, and it's a deep wound that had an associated trapped emotions with it, and it's come through and apparent now in this life for exploration, understanding, and evolution. That is, like, allow it to come to the surface and pass through, allow it to come up for healing, so that then the body can just then heal. It doesn't have to hold on to the pattern that's causing pain in the body anymore. It can release it. And that's just what it's doing for us. So in some ways, it's really simple. In other ways, it's very complex. So a new model of healing will help us to explore a variety of avenues that will help us understand and then treat disease or distress or physical events in the body from a different perspective. And brilliant. Modern medicine is brilliant in treating us in accidents or injuries, or immediate surgical intervention, or if a person's having a heart attack, to put stents in, and so getting the arterial blood flow again, that kind of thing. And it's brilliant, and thank God for that evolution, because it's been life-saving. But there's so many other aspects to it. So we need to expand our model, and I think it'll open up the doors for people to have expanded understanding of, and therefore allow other modes of treatment or modalities so that they can become whole again.
Well, and that's just it. We're always on a journey to wholeness, because when we recognize that we're spiritual beings living a human experience, and this desire of consciousness, this awakening that happens where it's like there's some part of you that wants something more. And what you're desiring is you want to feel more whole. I think that's what everybody, whether it's conscious or not, we all want to feel more whole. We want to feel ourselves. We don't, we want to feel better. And when we say we want to feel better, we want to feel whole. and that wholeness being feeling the frequency of our soul, feeling the depth and the breadth of who we are, and feeling good in our human body. And that's hard sometimes. I mean, I've had for as much time as I've spent trying to be in the alternative world of health and holistic, I've still had to have some major, I've had knee surgery, and I had an eye surgery from an injury when I was young, and I had jaw surgery. And, those early surgeries, I think, took me on a path that said, okay, I don't want to keep having surgery. And yet, I surrendered to it 2 years ago, even though I thought I would never have surgery again, because it was crystal clear to me when I found out that the tumor I had had cancer. I was like, I'm not going to claim that I have cancer. I'm going to claim my body had cancer, and I am going to have it removed. And so I had surgery again. Now, I did surgery very different, because I did it with the Ascended Masters and beings of light. And, it was probably the easiest recovery I've ever had, because I approached it in that holistic fashion. I did it very differently in my requests for support and the source of things and the energy, and healing was, much more effortless. Right. And so, yeah, I love the idea of thinking about it in a different model, right? Like I work with the medical system and do my standard follow-ups that I do, because, the medical world is very good at diagnostics. But then I also work with all of my healers and my holistic and integrative medicine practitioners and a chiropractor, and, trying to find also what supports my body and shifts my beliefs and my energy and whatever that is required to feel more whole, more complete. I love that. I don't know what that looks like in the future. I mean, we used to have that. I mean, our
I
medicine
know.
men and healers and women in the communities and the tribes, they were always looking at the whole person. I think when our
Oh,
medicinal systems advanced so quickly to treat trauma and crises, we lost focus on that. We lost focus on looking at the whole person and what the whole person needs.
well, we did. The Newtonian model, which I referred to earlier, also really focuses on just the sensory awareness and the five physical senses, as opposed to what about that intuition? And part of what's happening on the planet now is the rise of the divine feminine. And that is very strongly in the intuitive aspect is a feminine aspect. The intuitive aspect that leads us to greater understanding of what's going on, to perception at a much deeper level, can be so beneficial in terms of also diagnostics, not just a physical machine. Or, the palpation that the doctor might be doing over an area, which of course is diagnostic and helpful. But what's interesting is the rise now of the use of medical intuitives who are working alongside doctors. And this is happening more so in California. But the medical intuitive will pick up what they see. Actually, they can see with their clairvoyant sight through to what's happening at the cellular level or the organ level within the body. And they're able to, very often, if they're good intuitives, they can determine what the source of it is, what the cause of it is. And so they can bring all that information to bear, and the doctor can say, yes, that's what exactly is what's showing up on X-ray. And yes, I palpated a lump there. And yes, the person does have an associated infection with it because the white blood cells are up and they have a slight fever. So the medical evidence from the five sensory awareness is there, but the medical intuitive from other sensory awareness can give the other information, and so that the treatment then can be more, perhaps more holistic, but at the true source of it, not just at the level at which it's manifested. And so there are ways that we're moving forward in this. And some of the individuals that people can access through are that just the list of the healers in the Divine Healing book are able to do a certain amount of that, where they're as they're being guided about what's happening with the individual through their higher self or other beings of light that they're working with, they can see that, oh, this seems to be going back to a particular past life, for instance, and they'll bring it up for clearing, and so that they can release a pattern that will then manifest in the present as having that pattern released, so that then the opportunity for healing in the body and mind can occur. So that's the brilliant part of it, is the extra sensory awareness, the knowledge that are given as we're working with the client. And that's why there's, I think, more hope for transformation that can take place within the individual who is having a struggle, health struggles. So that's some of the beauty of the advancement of or creation of a new model of the human.
Yeah, it's that I love the idea. Well, I love working with medical intuitives because yeah, I'm always in awe, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that's incredible. So yeah, the first place I go when I have something wrong is a medical intuitive. Then I go to the medical system. So
Ah.
yeah, I love that you mentioned that. So that's perfect. And there are so many, like I'm reminded of a concept of muscle testing, and I often go back to they're not in the energy, they're dealing in the energy healing world, but they don't even call it that. It's with nutrition response testing. And so it's a whole system out there that, through how your muscle testing, which is, the concept of does your muscle, most people use somebody's arm and you hold your arm up, and does your muscle go, your arm go weak, or does it stay strong based on questions you're asking and working with the body? So they're able to identify which organ is out of balance and then what supplements help rebalance that organ and that organ system. And so this, like, I think of my health and I have a team of people that I work with, right? I have insurance and I have medical doctors, and in certain environments, I go through and I do the routine diagnostics, and had a mammogram, and that was how there had been a lump there that had been there a year and a half before I was willing to allow them to biopsy it, because I continued to trust my own intuition, and it was like, no, now's not the time. And they're
Mhm.
like, you really should have a biopsy. And I'm like, no, it's not the time. And I'm like, it's not growing. Well, then it started growing. And I'm like, okay, fine,
Okay.
I'll have a biopsy. And, so that is an important aspect. Like, there's incredible value of doing the routine things because it's data and it is information that is available in the medical system. But I also, I work with a chiropractor, and I work with a medical intuitive, and I work with a holistic naturopath. And then I work with all of my friends and their ascension journeys and their higher selves. And so finding, and all the healers that, having, viewing your own health and well-being is that you create your own team of support. I mean, I think the model is going to change because of all of us that, like, I don't only rely on my chiropractor, because that's not the only mode of healing that's going to help me be whole. And so I think this concept of, a new model means you have like a team of people. But until that exists, we start to change it by creating our own team of people, right? Do you pursue yourself? You mentioned the energy of the divine feminine, and the energy of the divine feminine, my higher self is very much about wanting to have people understand a new model of that. And I don't always language it that way, but my experience of that model is it's not just intuition. It's, this aspect of the divine feminine is that we're listening to our intuition, but what that really means is that we're willing to recognize our own inner strength, our own inner power. And in order to do that, we have to listen to our intuition, and we have to identify what we need, right? Like, sometimes I need to do my own healing, but I also need to physically support by having a team around me that is part of that, of the people that I look to and are able to work with, right? That I can go to for guidance and support of, I'm struggling with this. What do I need to do here? And so I lost my train of thought because I have so much information that shows up at one time sometimes, is
Yeah.
we create the new model by being in our own aspect of the balance of the divine feminine and the divine masculine, by supporting ourselves, right? By standing in our own power, by knowing our own inner truth, by listening to our intuition. And that model changes because we create our own teams, right? And we take care of ourselves.
Absolutely. And you really listened to that in your particular journey with cancer, and you were able to pick what felt right to you from the medical system and what they were offering to you, and to say no to others. And that served you well. And you have created a team around you. And wouldn't it be brilliant if that's the way it worked? If you entered into a treatment clinic rather than a medical clinic, that they would have medical doctors on hand, that they'd have, technology that could assist in determining precisely what's going on, and have the various options of treatment available. So it's not just allopathic, but it's naturopathic, or, it might also be some counseling. It might be
Mm-hmm.
some learning how to release trapped emotions that are guiding us on a subconscious level in repeated patterns that are perhaps unhealthy that we want to change. And so it can be hugely complex, but if we had a more comprehensive diagnostic model and individuals that were specialists within these fields, a team is just, it's just perfect. I love the idea of having a medical intuitive on board. Now they can really
Right.
help
That would be
define.
incredible.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, things only change by new thought structures being brought into humanity and being discussed. I think these teams exist in some unique places. Like when I was, I read so much and tried to learn so much about cancer and how what we know about how the body can heal cancer, right? How we, in its simplest, healthy bodies don't grow cancer. And so that was a real, like, that statement in one of the books. I'm like, I think I'm healthy, but I'm like, well, you know what? I have to accept that I still am not doing everything I need to be whole and
Mhm.
healthy. And I still have learning, right? As much as I've learned about health and well-being my entire adult life, it was one of those moments where I still had to radically change some diet and behavior. And that was on me.
Yeah, and
And, but I did read in that research, like there's a book that talked about the biomat, but there's actually, in different countries like Japan uses the biomat, right? And there's countries that acupuncture is part of the medical routine and regimens.
yeah.
And so I think there's pockets of it that happen around the world.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Reiki
for
is
sure.
used actually in some
Yeah.
hospitals, and
Yeah.
acupuncture is in hospitals for pain management. And so there's this aspect of places and pockets of it that are changing. But probably like what I'm getting in this moment is the success rate of some of that is limited because we're not doing the education about the importance of the individual choosing their healing and setting their own intentions around. Like, people live in so much fear around their health, right? Fear of dying, fear of pain. And in that fear, they're not able to choose healing, choose a path of wholeness, and choose that something can be different or change. And so then they end up at the mercy of the medical system because of the fear. And that fear then is really, when you talked about counseling or therapy or healers, often those fears come from past lives, right? I've died in a hospital. I've died in a car crash. I've died because of a medical issue. I died because there wasn't medical care. And, those fears could be so easily addressed with, having even just the ability to be engaged in your own healing process, to let go of the fear could be so easily addressed with healers and, people dealing in the Akashic records and past lives, so that you could move into then your medical intuition and truly, embrace the healing that's possible.
Absolutely. And the utilizing, recognizing the value of all of these practitioners, say, like you were just saying, someone who can access your Akashic records, for instance, that can talk about this. This is, or to find out, is this part of your destiny? And this is going to happen. And, part of it is you're learning about, whatever this situation is. And being able to encourage the client to have an intuitive feel and acknowledging it and listening to it, so that some of the fear does go away, because it's like, well, if I don't comply with this, and I don't necessarily want to do it because I know there are going to be serious side effects, and I don't want to deal with that, what are the alternatives? Well, the limitations of modern medicine are that there aren't a lot of alternatives that they're going to recommend. They'll say, well, you know what? You don't want to be an early statistic here. We're going to give you a fighting chance. And so the fear that goes along with it is very real. And that's, it's not acknowledging, like you said, that sort of that inner knowledge, that this the power of the individual's personal knowing, and that it has to start there with the humanely looking at it, not statistically looking at it. Oh, you've got this diagnosis. Okay, well, 20% of the time in 5 years, you'll still survive. Well, that's not good enough. I am a unique individual, and there's got to be
Right.
some other level of causation here that is not being considered. And also, what about, some vibrational frequency therapy and some form of sound healing, light, color, vibrational healing through homeopathy? And yeah, you're right about the fact that there are other countries in the world that are broader in their scope of viewing things, and have been for a very long time, and even build technology around it. So it's yeah, it's quite interesting we're in the early stages here in North America, I would say. We have a long way to go, Sheila.
Yeah. Well, and we have a medical system that's incented in the wrong ways. I've worked in
Mhm,
healthcare
mhm,
technology for a number of years,
mhm.
and my mom, as I had mentioned, was an RN. And so doctors' offices and healthcare clinics that are paid by insurance and doctors that are controlled and maybe not controlled, highly influenced by pharmaceutical companies. It's a very complex
Oh,
environment to create change in.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
it's not easy at
Yeah,
all.
yeah.
So, as we approach completing this conversation, you have stepped into your own healing and what services that you offer. So, I thought maybe you could just, highlight what you do with Ascension Dowsing, and then know that we'll probably do an episode just on that because I think it's such a fascinating. It, it's Yeah, it's a whole topic into itself. So, but I would love to have you just express maybe not as much about what dowsing is, but like how did you, just highlighting when we're talking about this aspect of divine healing, just a little bit of your own story that led you to dowsing and this aspect of, your journey of an RN and seeing this very real world and then also moving into this aspect of divine healing and energy healing and, how that has played out for you.
Oh, wow. So I came from, the medical model background. I have a degree in nursing science. And, my family background, particularly on my dad's side, they're all nurses and doctors, and, science is the thing. And so when I was in my early 30s, I was reading an article in my Canadian Nurse Journal. And I read it and I read it again, I read it again, and I didn't understand it. And it was written by a PhD nurse who's teaching at a university in Canada, who'd written an article about, healing on an energetic level, about cellular memory, and about all these things I'd never heard of before. And as I said, I read it and reread it, and I still couldn't really comprehend what she was talking about. I thought, but I'm ever curious. So I decided to explore what that meant. And I came across a book by a woman named Dolores Krager, who's also a PhD nurse, who'd done research on energy medicine and intention and had been able to replicate studies and showed how you could actually heal through intending to create energy in plants. You could make them thrive. And she said, okay, well, the equivalent in human for chlorophyll would be hemoglobin. And so doing the same process in humans measured the hemoglobin rise every time. And it was like, wow, this is fascinating. How do you do that with not taking iron or giving blood to hemoglobin? How is it that, it isn't just physical to physical? What is this energy about? And at the time, there was very, very little available. So I just explored and read everything I could and watched Oprah. And this. I even got to hear Chopra one time and Wayne Dyer. And
Mhm.
being kind of on the early forefront of it, it was absolutely fascinating. And, people didn't believe me and what I was talking about. And they were like, what? So I worked with some nurses and we created a holistic nursing group. And we invited all kinds of guest speakers in who were, chiropractics or optometrists, people who were expanding their field, who were doing things a little bit differently, and they wanted to talk about it, and they were really happy to. So that went on for a few years, and that was my way of exploring healing. And along the way, I learned different techniques. So I'm making this story quite long, but I'll just anyway, my interest was always there. And so I learned quite a number of modalities. But how did I settle on this Ascension Dowsing? Well, my daughter was home and she was very sensitive. She's an empath and she was having nightmares. And I thought, well, what's going on here? So I called a friend of mine I knew who was a dowser, and I said, do you think there's something here? And she said, sure, I'll come over and check. And she says, oh, okay, there's a negative vortex under the head of the bed, and there's a portal in this mirror. And she said, I'll just seal this stuff off and should be fine. And sure enough, my daughter, the nightmare ceased and right away. And I thought, holy cow, no, that was immediate and huge. And of course I had to explore that one. And then my friend Jan Thompson, who you interviewed, and I took, and several friends actually took quite a few courses together and got and became certified in it. But we gradually, after practicing it, turned it all around, and we're guided by Saint Germain to develop a whole new practice using sacred geometry and how to raise the vibration on a permanent level within one's home. So it's more than just saging your home once and clearing the energy out. It's creating a sanctuary, really. And it's amazing the effects that people experience. They're all different, they're unique, and there's some sameness to it as well. But I would love to talk more about this with Jan on another podcast with you, because it's an aspect of healing homes and properties and generating a much higher vibe space. So it's really helpful on so many levels. So anyway, we think it's
Yeah,
brilliant.
we'll definitely have to do that. I won't even mention my own experiences and incredible things
Okay.
that have happened in my own home,
Yeah.
other than stay tuned, because we'll record that later this year. So thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I think that what's really interesting is there's, because you have that background in a degree in nursing and this aspect of what's more, traditional mainstream medicine, to then bring in this aspect of energy healing and then divine energy healing, there is a perspective that you're always, I would imagine, like you always had to prove it to yourself, right? Like, did this really work? How did it really change? How do I believe in these unseen helpers? Because your general, well, everything that we're trained is to look for the what's real, right? Give me a
Yes.
medicine, give me something physical, all of that. But it does let you, like, I think I had a bit of that too. My mom was an RN, but I never wanted to be an RN, yet there was a part of me that always, in that aspect of helper and healing, like I wanted to know how could we really heal and be whole. And I could watch how the medical system wasn't working, right? Like I
Right.
watched it with my
Right.
mom and her own health and her own
Yeah.
being an RN. And, she's crossed over now, but the healthcare system didn't help her live a long life. you know, it, it,
Yeah.
it nothing about the healthcare system, including that she started smoking in nurses training, right? Like that was the thing everybody did. And
Sure.
she died of emphysema. And so, this aspect of, I think she was always she thought I was crazy, but also a little curious because she knew that I wasn't as willing to commit to the mainstream medical system. I was always willing to challenge it. And even in her nursing, I like, like she followed the medical system, but yet found this incredible, like he was a masseuse energy healer in the small town that I grew up in, and he was often, Springfield, and she took me to him. Like somehow she had found this guy. He was in a trailer and like, but he had somehow become known in some group of nurses and medical world that he was the guy that could really help you when medical system couldn't do anything, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so she took me to high school, and I remember walking in on crutches from a sprained ankle, and I walked out without crutches, right? And it was, there's probably some moment of that I was like, yes, healing is possible.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand what he was doing necessarily, right? I don't remember it completely, but he definitely did energy work and, was probably almost kind of more of a shaman healer. And yeah, so I just love that you bring that aspect of, it's curiosity, but I'm sure there's an aspect of a little bit of like the prove it to me and I'm open to it, right? The prove it to me and I'm open to it, because like you wouldn't be able to get rid of that with your background as a nurse.
Oh, no. Yeah, it's really, really important. And I think that that helps you become discerning. And that's very, very
Yes.
important, to be grounded and to question things like, okay, now is this a fit? But what I find is over the years that often the pattern for people is to be dismissive rather than to be interested or explore. And for me, the actual scientific method is one of, let's be curious. What about this? What about this observation that I'm making? I wonder what is there, and asking questions and generating perhaps a line of inquiry and study and research that will go along with it. To me, a curious mind can take you down rabbit holes, but you can also,
Yeah.
you can also you look at things from a different point of view so that you can explore and discover. That's the scientific inquiry that I understand anyway. But just to say, oh no, that's not scientific, dismiss, out, doesn't work. No, I will stick with this one modality and that's that. But to be discerning in the process is of course important, but you can't, one goes along with the other. So yeah.
Yes, the discerning is that aspect of trusting our intuition, right? Our
Yes.
inner wholeness, our inner what path is right for us. There's scenarios where if the data and the cancer I had removed, if it was a different situation and I had different scores that the medical system had shared with me, I might have made a different choice, right?
Right.
But in that moment with that information, you make the choice that you feel is best for you. And when we can own those choices completely, that's where we get to heal and stand in our power. When we can not be in the doubt that lets all of the other ickiness creep back in of
Yeah.
our own healing journey. So,
Yeah. I mean, just, somebody is so certain that and makes things black and white, but it isn't that way. And I think we're at that point for sure in our treatment and health modalities today, our modern medicine, where, the system, people are often fond of saying the system is broken. It's turnstile medicine and so on. Oh, okay, what are your symptoms? Here's a pill. Let's go next. And it's not just that. That's not a very fair summary. It's just that it needs to evolve. It needs to evolve to a better model of what the human is, and needs to incorporate all the aspects of care within that model so that you have choices that are presented to you. It's not just one system and that one system is superior in all counts. It's not, that's just not the way that we need to be looking at it anymore. And so, the message from divine healing is, well, at least if you're seeking any of these healers and you feel intuitively that this would be a good alignment, you can then access what they have to offer in terms of, helping you to create change. And it doesn't mean that it's one or the other, as you were saying earlier. You can use both systems, but one may not be complete. It's just incomplete. That's the thing. And so you need to find ways to discover what is the actual source of what's going on here and heal at source, not just try to mitigate symptoms, for instance. So anyway, it's complex.
yeah, I
We
mean,
know
there's a
that.
part of the medical system that, like, we can say it's broken because it's not treating the whole person,
Yeah,
but it's more brilliant than it's ever been. Like, to your
right.
point early on, right? Like, there's an aspect of the medical system that, like, it's incredible, right?
Oh,
Like, we can take an
absolutely.
organ and put it
Mhm.
into somebody's body and it works, right? Like, that's mind blowing, the
Oh,
things that are
yeah.
actually happening in the medical system. It's just that they don't really know how to deal with chronic and long-term health issues very well,
No,
right? That's the part.
no.
They don't know how to deal with the mysteries of the body that we still don't understand. Like, the stuff that we understand, the medical system is brilliant. But when you take like the mind and the brain and the subtleties of how viruses work in the body, like some of that stuff we just don't understand yet. So yeah,
No.
it's evolving. We have to evolve and
It-
understand that physical bodies are still energy. And when we come back and talk about divine healing or energy healing, the physical body is, while it seems physical, it's actually just energy vibrating at a lower level. And so
Right.
that's the power of healing, divine healing, energy healing, emotional healing, thoughts, that we can affect this aspect of our bodies and the energy that we are vibrating at. It really does create infinite possibilities of our journeys and how we can find wholeness
Mhm.
here in amazing they're incredible human bodies that we have the gift of exploring our soul in, exploring our connections, exploring this planet. And yeah, it's amazing. So continuing to find this path to wholeness is part of the journey. It's part of our journey here.
Maybe we need to call it a quantum model of healing.
There you go. Evolve.
There you go.
Model. That'd be a whole nother topic.
Yeah.
So Carol, how can people find more information if they wanted to reach out and work with you or curious more about this topic?
Okay. Well, there's a website they can access called divinehealingstories.com. And there you'll see pictures and biographies of all of the healers that are listed in the book. And it's a good idea to just, if you're interested in any of this, to go to that website, have a look, see if there's anybody that you want to connect with, read the description and say, okay, and then their access information is listed there. If you want to read the book, it's called Divine Healing, Powerful Stories of Transformation with Higher Selves and Beings of Light, available on Amazon and other portals. The other site that if you want to learn more about Ascension Dowsing, it's www.ascensiondowsing.com. And that information is also available at divinehealingstories.com. But again, we'll talk more about that at a later time. So that'll be something to look forward to. So,
well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it was just a pleasure. I love talking about healing in any capacity. I think it's consumed me for the last 40 years, as it has probably you to a large extent. And it's it's complex. It's there's no simple answers or solutions, but we're working towards all of that as we evolve as humans, and that's brilliant. So at least we're on a path. So
yes. Well, I'm going to close with a quote that's from the preface of the book, and the quote that Carol Ann shares is, "You are important. Your life is important, and you deserve to be healthy and happy." And that sums our entire conversation up in its entirety. And hopefully everybody who's listening has found some hope with their own healing journey in our conversation today. You've just listened to the Spiritual Geek Podcast. Thank you for joining us. If you've enjoyed the episode, please share a comment, rate it. It helps everybody else get to learn more about this and what we're talking about. Sharing with friends and family, sharing in your social media, your newsletters, however that works for you. Love and light to each of you. May your day be filled with joy and wisdom as you consciously create your life.